Hi, I'm Dennis Sim. I'm a longtime Kaplan teacher and your teacher for this sample class video. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to go through a few questions in each of the topics that the ACT covers. And our goal is to help you better understand what to expect on the actual ACT and show you how we might cover these topics in our classes. Now, in an actual live class, you'd be able to ask questions whenever you want to a team of teachers working with you. But since we're not actually live, instead, we're going to ask that you leverage the advantages of video. We're going to encourage you to do things like pause, replay, or even fast forward to focus on the content that matters most to you. Now, don't worry if anything looks unfamiliar. That's the whole point of doing this, or really any kind of prep. Question by question, we want to get more comfortable, more confident, and by the actual test, have no surprises. Now, let's jump into our first topic, English. In the ACT English section, you'll be given a series of passages. And within those passages, you'll have underlined portions of sentences that you'll be asked to correct to get to the right answer. Now, the best advice I'm going to give you to start off is control that inner editor. And what I mean by that is don't immediately try to fix the underlined portion in the way that you might want to. That can take a lot of time. Plus, it's going to be frustrating because it's unlikely the way that you want to fix it will always show up in the answer choices. Instead, the best path forward is to first identify what's actually wrong or what's being tested, and then eliminate answer choices that don't work until you only have your answer, the correct answer, remaining. Let's try that on this question. So the first thing you want to do when you see a verb underline is you want to be able to hunt down the subject, the who or what in the sentence that's doing the action here. In this sentence, that's the noun continent. And because continent is singular, that means we need the singular form of the verb exist so that they agree with each other. That's exist with an S. Now that means we can immediately eliminate answer choice A as a possible answer. But if you're saying, wait, hold up. When I first read the sentence, it sounded okay. Why isn't the closest noun games, which is plural, the subject here? Well, let me introduce you to actually one of my favorite ways that the ACT tests this concept. It's very common as well. I like to call it the cookie jar rule. Here's what's going on. Cookies is definitely plural, just like the noun games. But the moment you put those cookies in a jar, now this entire noun is going to be singular because the jar is singular. And the prepositional phrase of can be a big clue of that. Games isn't on its own here. It's the continent of board games exists, right? And so for that same reason, we still need a singular verb. That means DR isn't going to work either because R is a plural form of the verb. D's gone as well. And if you have to choose between B and C, well, B introduces an unnecessary verb tense change. For that reason, go for the most direct answer here. The singular form of the verb exists, making C the correct answer. Now, this is definitely a subject-verb agreement issue. So let's talk a little bit more about that before we move on to our next question. Or fast forward if you feel like you have it covered. Here's a quick refresher on subject-verb agreement. Just like we did in the question before, make sure that your singular subjects match up with the singular form of the verb and the plurals match up with the plural form. We also use the cookie jar rule to help us determine if a subject was singular or plural. Now, another thing to know is that if you are working with the conjunction and really only the conjunction and, that will create a compound subject that is plural. So for example, Celia and Taylor are joined using the conjunction and. That makes this subject plural. That's why are is the correct form of the verb to use here. Now with any other conjunction, you would just focus on matching up with whatever noun is closer. So in this case, Taylor is singular, which is why is the correct form of the verb to use here. Now let's move on to a question in a different topic area. In this question, we had a pronoun underlined. When you have a pronoun underlined, the first thing you want to check for is to see if it agrees with the noun that it's replacing. So what can change in this sentence? Well, that's the peacock feather. Peacock feather is definitely singular, whereas they is a plural pronoun, which means there's no way that we would leave this sentence as is. For that same reason, we can get rid of G and H. Both of those are plural pronouns, which won't work here since our noun is singular. We need to roll with our last and remaining answer, J. It makes sense. It's singular, and J is a correct answer. This was definitely a pronoun agreement issue. Let's take a closer look at what that's all about. So here are a few quick things to remember about pronouns. A pronoun replaces a noun in the sentence, and the noun that it logically represents, we call that an antecedent. And just like we did in the sentence before, the pronouns must agree with their antecedents. Now, when there are multiple nouns in the sentence, that can be a little tricky, so just make sure you take your time to match it up. She had purchased. It's not the giraffes who purchased the lettuce, it's Addison. And so that's the correct pronoun to use here. Same thing with the second sentence. It, I guess, could be a number of things. But really, in this sentence, all we're talking about is the sapling. Everything else is a descriptive phrase. And so it, the singular pronoun, is the correct pronoun to use. Let's try another question. The big clue in this question is that the words that are underlined are most and volcanically. Volcanically is an adverb. It is a descriptive word. And what's being described in this sentence is Cruz's stage presence. Now, you wouldn't use an adverb to describe a noun. You'd have to use an adjective. And the adjective form here would be volcanic. For that reason, let's eliminate A and C as possible answers here. Now, in terms of B and D, what I'm really being asked is, do I need the word most or not? Well, you'd use the word most to compare one thing to two or more other things to say what is the most volcanic. That's not what's happening here. You're simply just noting Cruz's presence was volcanic. So let's eliminate B and let's roll with D as our answer here in this adjective versus adverb issue question. Now let's review what adjectives and adverbs are. Adjectives and adverbs are both modifiers. Modifiers are words or phrases that describe another part of the sentence. And just like we talked about, adjectives are what you'd use to describe nouns and pronouns. Here we're talking about Ian conducted an efficient lab experiment. So efficient is describing the noun experiment. Adverbs are what you'd use to really describe anything else. Verbs, adjectives, other adverbs. And here, Ian efficiently conducted a lab experiment. Now we're describing how Ian conducted the experiment rather than the experiment itself. And a clue for test A, in general, if you see the letters ly, you're probably looking at an adverb, and that's a good way to indicate to yourself, is this the concept that's being tested? Now I know that on the English section, it must feel like there are so many different issues that could be tested. But this is a straightforward method to tackle any ACT English question, regardless of the issue or topic area. First, identify that issue. And a lot of times the sentence structure, what's underlined, or even the answer choices themselves will give you big clues in terms of what you should be focusing on. And then two, remember to eliminate the incorrect answers. You don't need a great sounding answer. You just need to be left with the answer that doesn't have any errors in it. So that way, Once you eliminate and you plug in the remaining ones, you can choose the one that's the most correct, concise, and relevant to get the right answer.